Now, this is one of the most fun sections of the entire Bible. The beginning of Genesis chapter 6 is quite possibly the most contested, or one of the most contested sections. And you will see as we start reading it why. So there's three sort of, there are more than three sentences, but sort of three sections to this one verse. You can take them all in one paragraph so that they all go together. Some people break it up and say some of the sentences don't connect to the others. So we'll read it, and then we'll break it into the three pieces, and then we'll talk about each one. So when mankind, that's Adam, basically, when Adam, remember we said before, the word Adam and man, same thing. So when mankind began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, key phrase, saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful. They were good, right? And they took any they chose as wives for themselves. So that's one sentence, one thought, right? Mankind began to multiply. The sons of God, which we'll talk about, saw the daughters were beautiful and took any they chose as wives. Second section or sentence. And the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with mankind forever because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. Thought two. Seems fairly straightforward. There's a few questions on it. Third sentence or thought. The Nephilim were on the earth, both in those days and afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind, who bore children to them. They were the powerful men of old, the famous men. That's the third one. So you can see why this could be a bit of a complicated section. So start at the beginning. First sentence. When mankind began to multiply, daughters were born. The sons of God saw the daughters of mankind were good. The word actually is the same that you saw where it says beautiful. That's the same word, root word, tob, that says good, when God created and it was good. And they took any they chose, right? That took, basically just like when Eve saw the apple was good and she took it. So this is clearly a parallel of the garden and sin, right? So this is a sinful act that they did. These, for some reason, and we'll get into the sons of God, for some reasons, the sons of God should not have looked at the daughters of mankind and chose any for themselves, because that's not good. And that leads into the next sentence. And the Lord said, my spirit will not remain because they are corrupt. Right? So clearly, it seems pretty likely that this is a wrong decision, right? So sons of God is where it all sort of hinges, right? Who are the sons of God compared to the daughters of mankind, Adam? So probably the most common Christian view is this looks at the two lines. So the sons of God would be the Seth line from Genesis we just talked about, right? The Cain line that led down to Lamech was not of God, and the Seth line would be of God. So what it's saying is the sons of God, the sons of Seth, were starting to marry into the sons of Cain, right? And God was not happy with this, right? So he was upset that that was happening. So that is probably the most common view. There is a second view where sometimes the proponents of this view claim that the sons of God, this appears elsewhere, right? This phrase, sons of God, appears elsewhere. And a couple of the references are a bit vague. They could refer to kings or aristocrats. Personally, I've looked at them. I find this one to be hard to justify, because even the ones where they say, well, this just means aristocrats or kings, it could mean spiritual beings, which is the next answer that we're going to get to. So the Elohim, and that it's not the most common view anyway, but basically it's the aristocrats were marrying into the lower classes, and God was upset with that. Probably not the most common view, but there are some that say that. Um, and that basically that these sons of men, the aristocrats, were abusing the lower class is roughly what it is. That they were taking women sort of against their will or just taking advantage of them, the situation as aristocrats to take advantage of this lower class. The third view, which is actually a very fairly common view and academically supported and stuff. When you hear it, you may sort of think, hey, maybe these people are crazy, but it is a pretty mainstream, I want to say normal view, but not as crazy as it might seem if you are not familiar with this. The sons of God, the phrase is the sons of Elohim. So the word Elohim is basically usually used for spiritual beings. So, sort of angels or other spiritual beings like that. So, the word Elohim sometimes is referred to, you can tell, in a singular sense, meaning God, meaning he is the Elohim, the spiritual being. And sometimes it is clearly used for angels. So, it says God and the Elohim. So, it's sort of like, there are clearly other spiritual beings. So some people say angels, some people would say other things. But there is a widely held belief that there is something called the Divine Council, which is a group of spiritual beings that are basically angels that sort of work for God and that they're often referenced. Quite a few translations try to take these words where it says Elohim and translate them as either people or angels to make it sort of to take away that idea. But there's quite a few people. Probably the most popular person that sort of academically supports this is Michael Heiser. He's got a book called Supernatural. But it's not anywhere in any way heretical. Nobody thinks it's heretical. But basically, all he's saying is sometimes that there are situations, where God actually sits and talks with this divine council, and he says, "Hey, we've got this situation to sort out." There's one in Kings. I'm drawing a blank on how it works, but basically, the divine council says, "Hey, we'll go and sort this problem. I'll go in and pretend this, that, the other," and God says, "Yep, good one. Let's go do it." Right. So, where he's sort of chatting with this divine council, and a lot of the stuff in Revelations, where he sits and there's other thrones with him. They propose that's the divine council, and the whole view, or at least Michael Heiser's interpretation, is the Deuteronomy 32 worldview, which is we're about to get to in a little bit. There's a table of nations where God spreads it out, and in Deuteronomy 32, what he says is, "I'm going to keep the people of Israel as my own people, and I'm going to turn everybody else, all these other nations, over to these other spiritual beings." Right. So again, if this is new to you, you might think, hey, this is crazy, whatever else. But it is a fairly common view. There's a book of Enoch, which is the Enoch that we saw in the last chapter. And I said, hey, he's the seventh generation, right? He's kind of famous, even though he's only got that one line in the Bible. Mainly, the biggest fame he has is there is a book called the Book of Enoch. It is not in the Bible, not part of the canon, not even technically in the Apocrypha, although some churches bring it in. There are some churches in Africa and other places that include it. But it is the tricky part with it is quoted by Jude. So in Jude, he has a fairly lengthy quote from the Book of Enoch. So clearly it's read by many of them. And in the Book of Enoch, it explains that these sons of God were fallen angels that he calls them the fallen ones. That they come down and they procreate with humans, and they create the Nephilim, a race of giants, right? That were on the earth both in those days and afterwards. The sons of God came to the daughters of mankind, right? So basically, they created these giants. And as you go through the account of settling the Holy Land, there are some descendants of the Nephilim, the Rephaim and the Anakim, that are clearly sort of giants. You have King Og. You've got Goliath is one of the last of those giant races. Him and his brother. His brother is actually killed after him. But if you follow the Holy Land and their exploits, it appears as if one of the key aspects is driving out these giants, these Nephilim. So doesn't really change anything to do with salvation or Jesus or any of that. So it's not a salvific point, but interesting nonetheless. Michael Heiser has some interesting stuff, and you sort of get caught up in that. But sort of for me, the more interesting is the spreading of the Table of Nations and turning it over to these basically to these demons, these fallen ones, and how Acts basically is like the reclaiming of that. Acts goes through even all the place names and how it goes through. It's basically saying, hey, we're going to reclaim the Holy Land first. And you see all of these trips and the place names that are in Acts are basically all through the Holy Land, these key places where it sort of goes back and then to beyond, and it goes out to the Table of Nations, and it specifically names places that were not in the Table of Nations. And it's sort of a neat aspect to it. So that is the big fun piece of this, right? So then the next line says, and the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with mankind forever because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. So most people tie that to the sentence before for the reasons I just mentioned. Some people separate it and just say, hey, these are two independent thoughts. Most people say that this is a judgment for that first sentence. The question really is the judgment. Their days will be 120 years. You could take that as limiting the lifespan. If you saw in the genealogies before this, some of these people lived for an awful long time, right? 962 years and 969 years, right? And now God is saying that's not going to happen anymore. We're going to cap it at about 120, right? That is one option. The other option is it is sort of projected or expected that it was about 120 years later that the flood happened. So he's saying, I'm going to cap it because the judgment is going to be in 120 years. There's going to be this flood. So again, it's not super consequential, but there are two interpretations for that. Then you get to that last sentence. The Nephilim were on the earth, both in those days and afterward. So this creates an awful lot of Jewish lore about how do these Nephilim survive the flood, because that's obviously part of this. They were giants after, if you're looking at, Goliath and the Anakim and the Rephaim, and these giants that appeared after. How did those connect to before the flood? So there's lots of stories. They were hanging off the side of the ark. There's, different ways that this could have happened. Obviously, the Bible doesn't give you any detail on that type of stuff, right? But it talks about the Nephilim. The King James, I believe, actually translates it giants. So that adds to some of the mystique as you're going through. But that is the fun section. That is just this one paragraph right in the middle of Genesis 6. And it's funny because it's almost like a side note because it's talking about Noah. You're going through the genealogy at the end of chapter 5, and it says Noah was 500 years old. He fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And if you skipped to verse 5, then it says, the Lord saw human wickedness on the earth, and everything would sort of make sense. And you continue on and say, hey, wow, things are wicked. Yeah, and then Noah. And you go into that story. But there's this one paragraph in there that has inspired an awful lot of discussion and conversation as you go through. So again, none of it is salvific. So you do not have to get too uptight about whichever one you believe in. They are generally mixed in any given church on how that might happen. It has created some great fiction books around the Nephilim, some great stories about that, but it's not a necessary aspect of any theology. So, but it's fun. So that is it for this section. Good luck reading.